My daughter looked at me and asked, "Why did you never fall in love again?" I had an answer ready for years. But that day, I told her the truth for the first time. She was 16. We were sitting on the porch steps, the way we always did after dinner. And she asked it so casually that I almost gave her the same easy answer I had given every relative, every neighbor, every well-meaning friend who had tried to set me up over the years. I was busy raising you. I never found the right person. I was happy on my own. All true, in a way. None of them the real answer, but something about the way she looked at me that evening made me stop. She was not a child anymore. She deserved more than a line I had rehearsed to protect myself. So I set down my cup of tea, and I told her everything. It started 9 years earlier, when her father left. Not dramatically, not with shouting or slammed doors. He left the way some people leave, quietly, over months, until one day the leaving was simply complete. He said he needed to find himself. He said marriage had made him feel like he was disappearing. He said a lot of things that sounded like explanations but were really just excuses dressed up in gentler words. What he did not say, but what I understood clearly, was that he had stopped choosing us. I remember the night he packed his bags. Our daughter was 7. She was asleep down the hall, and I stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching him fold shirts into a suitcase, and I felt something strange happen inside me. It was not just grief. It was a kind of hardening, like a decision was being made in my body before my mind had caught up to it. I did not cry that night. I did not scream. I simply thought, from now on, it is the two of us, and I will not let her feel what I'm feeling right now ever again. The first year alone was the hardest thing I have ever lived through. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being the only adult in a house. Every decision, every bill, every school form, every fever in the middle of the night, it all landed on me alone. I remember standing in the kitchen at 2 in the morning once, our daughter sick with a fever, trying to read a thermometer through tears. I did not even realize I was crying because there was no one else to hand her to, no one else to say, "I've got this. You rest." I learned quickly that loneliness is not the absence of people around you. Loneliness is being the only one responsible. People started introducing me to men within that first year. My sister meant well. My coworkers meant well. Even my mother, who had never remarried after my father passed, kept saying, "You are young. You should not be alone." I went on a few dates, if you could call them that. Coffee that ended early because I had to get home before the babysitter's curfew. A dinner where I spent half the time checking my phone in case something happened at home. A man who, on the second date, asked when I was planning to get back to normal after the divorce. As if my daughter were a phase I needed to recover from rather than the center of my entire life. That comment stayed with me longer than I expected. Get back to normal. As if normal was something that existed before her, something I should be trying to return to. I remember driving home that night and looking in the rearview mirror and thinking, this is normal now. She is normal now. Anyone who cannot see that is not someone I have room for. But it was not just about the men who did not understand. It went deeper than that. There was a fear underneath everything, one I did not admit to anyone, not even to myself, for a long time. I was afraid that if I let someone else in, I would somehow divide myself. That loving someone new would mean loving her less, or at least loving her differently, with less of my full attention, less of my full self. I know now that is not how love works. Love is not a pie that gets cut into smaller pieces. But grief does strange math sometimes, and back then, I could not see past it. There was one man, a few years after the divorce, who I let myself care about more than the others. His name does not matter for this story, but what happened does. He was kind to her. He remembered her favorite cereal. He showed up to her school play once, sat in the back, and clapped louder than anyone. For a few months, I let myself imagine what it might look like, the three of us. A family shape forming again out of the pieces of the one that broke. Then one evening he sat me down and told me, gently, that he loved me, but that he was not ready to be a father. Not fully, not the way she needed. He said he could love me and still keep some distance from her, that it did not have to be all or nothing. And I understood, in that moment, exactly where I stood. Because for me, it was all or nothing. She was not a part of my life I could ask someone to love around the edges. She was the center. Anyone who wanted me had to want the whole shape of my life. And she was the largest part of that shape. I ended it that night. I did not cry for long. I remember feeling something closer to clarity than sadness. I went into her room. She was maybe 10 years old then, already asleep, and I sat on the edge of her bed for a long time just watching her breathe. I thought about all the men who had come and gone by then, all the ones who wanted someday instead of now, who wanted a partner but treated a child as an inconvenient condition attached to her. And I made a quiet decision that night that I never spoke aloud to anyone until years later, on that porch. I decided I would rather be whole for her than halved for someone else. That is not to say I did not want love. I want to be honest about that because I think sometimes we tell these stories in a way that makes the sacrifice sound easy, like it costs nothing. It cost plenty. There were nights I wanted someone to talk to about my own day, not just hers. There were holidays where I watched other couples across the room and felt an ache I did not let myself name. There were birthdays, mine, not hers, where I sat alone with a small cake and thought about what it would be like to have someone remember without being reminded. But every time that ache rose up, I would look at her and I would remember what it felt like to watch her father choose to leave. I did not want her to ever again watch an adult in her life choose something over her. Even if that something was my own loneliness. Even if that something was my own need to be loved the way a partner loves you, fully. Not divided by responsibility to someone else's homework and someone else's nightmares and someone else's growing pains. So I built a different kind of life. I built it around her recitals and her report cards and her scraped knees and, later, her heartbreaks. The ones that came when boys her age did not understand her the way I hoped someone eventually would. I built it around Sunday mornings making pancakes badly and laughing about it. Around bedtime stories that stretched an extra 20 minutes because neither of us wanted the day to end. Around the two of us against whatever the world threw at us. It was not the life I had imagined for myself at 25, but it became, slowly, without my even noticing the shift, the life I chose. Not the life I settled for. The life I chose. When I finished telling her all of this, she was quiet for a long moment. The porch light had come on automatically as the sky darkened, and I could see her face clearly, and I watched something move across it that I had never seen before. Not pity, not sadness exactly. Something closer to understanding, the kind that only comes when a child finally sees a parent as a whole person. Not just as mom, but as a woman who made choices, who gave things up, who chose her every single day for 9 years without once making her feel like a burden for it. She reached over and took my hand. And she said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She said, "I always thought I was the reason you were alone. I never realized I was the reason you were happy." And I told her, "No, sweetheart, you were never the reason I was alone. You were the reason I was never really alone at all. I do not regret the choice I made." I want to be clear about that because I know some people hearing this might think it sounds like a sad story, a woman who gave up love for her child. But I do not see it that way anymore, and I have not for a long time. I did not give up love. I chose a different kind of it, a quieter kind, a daily kind. The kind that does not announce itself with flowers or anniversaries, but shows up instead in packed lunches and late night conversations and a hand held on a porch step years later. Maybe. Someday there will be someone who wants the whole shape of my life, her included. Not as a condition to accept, but as a part to embrace. I am not close to that. But I no longer feel like I am waiting for my life to begin once that happens. My life already happened. It happened in this house, on these porch steps. in the space between a mother and a daughter who chose each other over and over. For 9 years and counting. If there is one thing I would want anyone watching this to understand, it is this. Real love does not always look like the love we are taught to expect. Sometimes it looks like staying. Sometimes it looks like saying no to something that could have been good because something else needed you to be whole. And sometimes the greatest love story of your life is not the one you were still hoping to write with someone else. It is the one you already lived quietly, faithfully with the person who was there all along.